Today, we're going to be talking about globalizing delivery strategy in regulated industries. Think about this from a high level is really how are you going to look at managing global teams and partners over 3 to 4 continents, even more time zones, obviously a lot more countries, different organizations, organizational types and structures. It's quite the norm in large pharmaceutical organizations, even before 2020. This isn't new because of COVID. This is, in fact, how global pharma usually delivers things, all projects. So not just like a SharePoint change or things like that. I'm saying, how do you get that flyer out to market? There's probably folks in 5 countries that are working on that in varying capacity. So today, though, we're going to look at the keys to delivering solutions with global teams in regulated industries. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of this is going to be about the soft skill side of it, because that's based on our experience where sometimes teams fall down. So there's some introduction, quick table of contents, get through all of this today. I got balls flying everywhere. My team did a killer job on this template. Here's our upcoming keynote sessions. I know we have one more by the illustrious John Howard, my mentor in all things project management, who will be doing the principles of project leadership next week. Definitely come to that. If you haven't seen Jay Howe talk, he's the man. And for the folks who don't know me, my name's Dan Lewis. I'm our Vice President of Digital Consulting. Fun fact, some of you may know this too. My friends and family run the highest quality tailgate ever at all Philadelphia Eagles home games. Feel free to come down. A little bit more about the digital practice. Really, our mission is to deliver innovative digital marketing engagement solutions to complex, large global organizations. We've been especially focused on the top 10 pharmaceutical realm in recent past. Our overall vision is to effectively provide highly knowledgeable technical services to high-value business and marketing teams. A lot of our core services are custom application and web design development and support, custom sales and marketing tool development, specifically for small, high-value sales teams, talking 7, 8-figure sales teams inside the pharma world. We're experts at regulated content delivery. Regulations don't always mean the same things in pharma. We're specifically adept at FDA OPDP 2253 promotional work, meaning the Office of Prescription Drug Promotions, as opposed to sometimes folks will hear about OND, Office of New Drug, regulatory, clinical regulatory, very different stuff that we do here. Additionally, HTML5 game design and development. This year, really breaking heavily into virtual reality experience design, development, and integration with 3 active engagements there. And finally, we are experts and a partner actually with Viva Systems for Viva CRM, and we have a very mature team and background in Adobe Experience Manager. And finally, we are Ionic experts. We have multiple Ionic apps, which is a cross-platform JavaScript development platform running across large pharmas. So let's get into the meat of today. Globalizing delivery strategy in regulated industries. The thing we're going to cover today is these areas. Why do organizations use partners around the world to deliver domestic solutions? How to organize your global teams, clients, partners, and vendors for success. Little anecdotal one that I'm going to say, stop saying my time and EST and EDT are not the same. Understanding cultural diversity and sensitivities, not only in the delivery market, but on the delivery team. And finally, the outcomes from a well-established global team. Jump in. So why, at the end of the day, why do organizations use partners around the world to deliver domestic solutions? I'll give you the top 3 as we see it in reverse order. Organization values immediate monetary savings and tactical cost controls. That's the one that I think a lot of judge folks are familiar with. Offshore, 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 whether we're talking Central Asia, Eastern Europe. The number one reason that I think we hear from CIOs and CTOs that they've offshored, and you guys speak to a lot more CIOs and CTOs than I do. I talk to CMOs. From what I hear through the other side of the house and through all my partners who call on IT, is that it's always about cost up front, immediate cost control. But the next case is usually then the more cerebral and advanced organizations, or even some of the same, get into using best-of-breed resources to complete their vision. You may have a developer or a technology that exists and was built in Estonia. Folks who don't know, Estonia is the Silicon Valley of Eastern Europe. And, maybe you need to get an Estonian small shop with 2 folks who are going to assist you with a particular type of technology that they're the best in. That's usually the next reason. But ultimately, it's because the organization's global. They don't just do business in the US or India or Canada, insert 300 country names here. In fact, they do business everywhere, or maybe a bulk of the globe. And most of the organizations that are the digital practice clients, are my long-term clients, are all have a global remit or are part of a global organization. So a lot of the times we're talking about clients, partners, and vendors. We're all this big mix. I like to say that we're enforced marriages from our clients to work with other vendors. Sometimes they're partners of ours, or sometimes we're partners with them. Other times they're just another vendor, and off you go get married and make babies. So we always start with the always understand. Always understand roles and responsibilities. It sounds basic, but I've noticed in multi-organizational disparate global teams that the who owns what is not always defined up front. There's a lot of assumptions that happen based off of previous engagements, things like that. Always clearly define roles and responsibilities. Approval pathways is kind of hangs off of that as well. Who approves what, where are they at? I'll give you a real example on this. I'm trying to get an IT standard, technically, it's an IT standard, changed at a global level for one of our marquee clients. And I actually had to have a global marketing lead sponsor it. She sits in Rio for a project that's being delivered in the U.S. for a U.S. brand team. And but that approval actually had to come from a gentleman who sits in Romania who works out of their UK headquarters. And so that was a real thing just to get an approval. Just to determine that approval path took me weeks. Next, hours of operation. And this is, you got to understand it because it becomes one of your biggest assets. How do your team's locations affect the overall operational window per day? This could be your specific team. So, take the digital practice at JCG. We've been a remote team predominantly before COVID. This is, March was nothing new for us. We have folks that sit anywhere in Florida, the Poconos, New Jersey. Right now, I'm in North Carolina. I'm normally probably the one in the office the most before this, besides one of our developers. But now we're all over the place. Now we're all on the same time zone, so our window doesn't really change too much, but we've been able to make synthetic window changes to our operational hours. Because we always want to keep in mind local culture and customs. Holidays and working hours aren't the same globally. I know for traditional Hindu Indian holidays, Judge very much so spreads that love out there. And there's lots and lots of other days and holidays and traditions that exist throughout the world, throughout different religions and cultures. Understanding how local culture and customs affects holidays and working hours is key. You have to account for that, really, because then the other side of that is management and communication style inside different organizations, depending on where they are. And it has to do with two reasons. Sometimes it's the different corporate culture, but then also the local, domestic culture within that nation that have varied styles and approaches. If anyone has ever worked with any French-owned companies, specifically Parisian-based companies, and have seen an email from a director there, they're fascinating. Anecdotally, I'll give you a great example of, there was an email for a simple approval that was asked of a corporate headquarters from one of my international clients some years ago. And it had to be done, it was done in French to try to help out the request. The response was shown to me by Judge's client, and it was 5 paragraphs long for what amounted to a yes or no question. I had very little to no knowledge of written French, enough to be dangerous. But, reading through, I'm noticing that the first 3 paragraphs, and being translated by a client, were all fluff. It was all fluff in the first 3 paragraphs. The 4th paragraph, midway through, addressed the yes or no question. And then the 5th, more fluff to exit it. And so this was my first introduction to really how the management communication style in another major nation, top 10 economy globally, France, acts differently, and how they handle a yes or no question. It is very, very much filled with pomp and circumstance. Now, working with some other folks in Northern Europe, and worked extensively with a group out of Denmark in the early 2010s, very short and to the point. The Danes follow the law of Yenta. It's about humbleness and non-braggadocio. So that lends itself to very concise communications that are not top-heavy. And I use that as the other side. So not just the communication, but the management structure, right? Hierarchical, flat. In Japan, Very much in a business culture, you always know who the boss is. And even in France too, but Japan even more so. The boss is the boss. The boss sits in a certain spot at the table. The boss sits at the head of the table. If the folks in there don't want to make a community decision, they look towards the boss. In some of our flat, modern IT organizations and creative groups in the U.S., I see, very flat, autonomous operations right now. And I was kind of teased, if I had to go to John Battaglia for every decision, like I see some other, so some of my peers at other organizations do in other countries, John would, go insane just giving me yes, no answers every day. It'd be nuts. So we have to understand that, though, about these partners, because we're going to need them to go outside of their norms sometimes. And if we can understand how they get that done, it helps us to achieve common success. Because really, what's the goal? The day-to-day interactions all contribute towards a common goal. And then I'll say never forget, because at the end of the day, I'm very blessed to have spent a lot of times with people of all different cultures and backgrounds throughout, pretty much every continent except Australia in the past 10 years. And I've noticed 4 things that we always kind of go to. And now how we do this may be different, but family, respect, safety, and trust. We all care about that. Doesn't matter what God we believe in or if we believe in one at all. Doesn't matter on a multitude of moral and social issues. It doesn't matter. We care about family, respect, safety, and trust. And so if we keep those tenets in our mind, at the end of the day, the developer in Belarus is worried about feeding their family, is ensuring that our organizations have mutual respect for each other. I mean, their safety is probably derived from some of their financial stability, and then finally trust. In this case, we have to ensure that the development team in Belarus and, the project management in the United States trust each other and what we say we are doing. And that does not vary around the world. How we respect trust, some could sit there and argue with me, is different culturally, and I would tend to agree with you. But ultimately, it still boils down to respect, trust, safety, and family. And finally, because we learn through mistakes, every interaction, especially on a global capacity, is a learning experience. And we are in a global economy, and it's not going anywhere. So let's get into some more meat, some anecdotal stuff. I call this out because it's something that I see constantly with global teams, especially when folks are inexperienced with dealing with such, especially when your business is domestic in the U.S., kind of picking on all us Americans on the East, all us East Coasters right here, because we all are guilty of this, even myself. How do you do relative time? You have to establish a common language around date and time conversations that are used across the team. Look, every American I know is already going to say the rest of the world writes their dates wrong. The rest of the world looks and says, why do Americans do it backwards, guys? It's day, month, year. Look at inheritance. Why would you do month, day, year? Think about it. We'll get back to that. So don't speak in relative terms. Use precise language. So stuff that, and if Don Richter's on the phone here, he has heard me yell at him about this many times. Donnie, I apologize. This is a pet peeve of mine. So let's have that tomorrow at 9 a.m. my time. Nope. Let's have that tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern EST in June. Guys, I hate to tell you, EST is not in June, it's EDT. And that matters if someone wants to put it into a date conversion. Let's have that tomorrow at 9 a.m. U.S. Eastern. That's always correct. That is precise to the moment. If you are on the East Coast, where Judge is a Philadelphia-based company, a lot of us are from the Philly, New York area, not all. Stop saying EST. Stop saying Eastern Standard. I promise 50% of the time, we're wrong when we say it. Just say U.S. Eastern. It's very precise, and no matter what of the other 23 time zones in this world that individual is located in, they can backtrack to U.S. Eastern based off of time in New York City. Because we ultimately want to get to the goal. It's not just Dan being particular about how we talk about time. It's about these points on the right here, really establishing a global coordinated schedule where we understand overlapping working times, optimal handoff and review times, while still respecting holidays and time constraints. That's the ultimate. If another anecdotal example, working with that same French-owned financial organization, I didn't mention we were actually working with their Belgian subsidiary. We were doing development in the U.S. East Coast. And we were able to set up a cadence. So at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. at the effective end of the Central European time, throwing that out there, Central European time banking day, that they would be able to leave and Judge would have its direction for the rest of the day. because at that point it's only 11 a.m. We have 5-6 more hours of billing productivity easy without going into after hours. And then being able to then turn around progression by the end of the day, complete with release notes, comments, requests for feedback, whatever the context. So then by the next day, our partner over in Belgium actually had the time to go and review our work, answer that feedback, potentially escalate and get a question answered even. So by the time our team was back in the U.S., 8-9 a.m., he was already cruising towards the project manager on that side, cruising towards getting us resolutions or validations. It was a great handover. And then if you add someone in, East Asia or Central Asia that you can then add on to that timeline, so you have that kind of that full inverse of a U.S. time. If you want to be U.S. Eastern centric, that's okay in your own mind. It's where we live, some of us, not all. And to do that. And so I know I'm going on and on about time and constraints. Bottom line, figure out how your whole team works. Figure out how their working days overlap. Figure out dependencies on each, and then plan high level to do handoffs, meetings, and collaborations during overlap times or times that benefit the people who are getting content handed to them. Get into the next. All right, so that's about getting things done. Let's talk about the people side, because if people aren't happy, nothing's getting done. Because it's not just the delivery market, but the delivery team. We may be working, with a team in the U.S., a team in India, and a team in Brazil to deliver something to Germany. Who knows? Maybe there's just one person in a local market in Germany. Maybe they're trying to break into a new market and don't even have a proper local market presence. We have to think about that, because not all companies then are going to have the same philosophies and cultures. May not even be in the same location. I joke with people about the number of folks who work with or for our digital practice who I have never seen in person. It's amazing. So let's understand about their sensitivity. Let's understand their sensitivity to be a better part of it. I'm going to go back to what I had as a small bullet earlier, because we need to talk about this. Corporate holidays, PTO policies. Holidays and vacation policies vary wildly around the world. Good luck getting things done in Europe in August. 3 days off. 3 weeks off, rather. At least 3 to 4 weeks off holiday. Plan accordingly. And don't tell them they're wrong. They don't care, especially if they're the client. And if they're not the client and they're a partner or another vendor through the client, usually a pretty good chance that the client's aware of the fact that they're, have those considerations. Next thing, don't judge those other organizations for closing a day that your organization is open. It will not make you feel any better. Real example, last Wednesday, one of our partners, top 4 global design agency, took off on Wednesday. They called it a day of meaning. They did some internal exercises, and they did not permit themselves as an organization to have any meetings with clients unless they were approved by an upper executive. You were to have only internal team building things. All client calls canceled. That really didn't help my team. It didn't help our client that day. But it's not going to make you feel any better by saying, "Oh, it's not going to work." No, you plan accordingly and plan around it. If they're a mutual vendor, that's through your client. If your client's not happy with that, let them deal with that. But you can't let your team get disparaged because of that. Because I promise, that same organization that had a day of meaning, the previous Wednesday before Thanksgiving, they also decided to close and give an extra holiday. And they did the same thing right before Labor Day. And, this is a U.S.-based organization, top 4 agency. Getting upset about it, getting frustrated about it would not help my team to achieve success. We planned around it. Finally, accepting and not judging does not imply not planning. Management organizational structures. I've already given a couple examples about this with the boss in Japan, with the boss communication from France. Not all organizations, though, are strict hierarchies and top-down. Not all organizations have strict management. Some of them are very much true entrepreneurial based. Look at Judge right now. I'm sure there's folks on this call that have worked in various groups, anything from running a small book, I say small, but a humble book inside of a permanent staffing where they're very high value deals take longer to do. We have folks that work on some of our managed accounts where, frankly, we're getting asked to bulk buy stuff where it's more of a commodity play, and you're working inside of a larger team. We have our folks inside of consulting who very much are working with the needs of a particular client. And then I know for my practice in particular, there's a number of individuals, 1099 folks, who are brought on as experts inside who don't answer to anyone but themselves, and pretty much who they're working for on the project team inside a judge at that point. So we always have to handle that accordingly. Especially knowing that last point I just mentioned, the independent contractors. We all deal in place contractors. Think how the attitude is different, the sense of ownership is different to the overall project. Go back to that, meetings and calls. This is more organizational dependent, a lot less location dependent. We know some groups want to schedule and hold meetings that may seem unnecessary. Just the reality. They think it's necessary. They're going to think the same thing about some of your meetings. My project manager may call a meeting for something that the other partner doesn't feel is actually necessary, but it's that mutual respect of a global team that if one piece of the overall organizational delivery team feels that something is necessary, don't immediately dismiss it. The next type of organization that I love, I call it the everyone in the kitchen sink to a 5-minute meeting. I deal with these daily. We all probably do, where it's a conversation about something very trivial. We would think trivial when all of a sudden either the client or one of our other vendors we're working with, brings everybody from the designer, the editor, all the way up to like the engagement lead or account manager. And you're like, guys, we're talking about how this one line of text is aligned. We don't need that. But whatever, you ignore it. You just go into what it is. You go into the meat. You go into what you need to accomplish for your project team and ultimately then for the client. Because as I say here, respect the individual organization's work for a middle ground around meetings and call cadence for an engagement. It's okay to push back and say we don't need calls daily when you don't. You can do them twice a week. That's the negotiation point. But do respect that they're going to come, that every organization is going to come from a different point of view. Even Judge, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of us subscribe to the John Howard School of Project Management. As he kind of put his fingerprints all over our project management processes inside of JCG. And so I'm sure there's things that we do that are perceived in a similar way here. That's that. So outcomes. I don't know about everybody on the call right here, but everything that I get asked for when I'm going to do a new proposal for work right now for a client is tell me what the outcomes are going to be, Dan. How can I measure your success? Really what we see is the outcomes of a well-established global team come due to culture diversity, creating expansion of ideas not possible from a team within a single country market area. If you've never worked with an international partner, you do it. It gives you such a viewpoint on things you're not thinking. The way you do your day-to-day life is possibly so different than theirs outside of those 4 core tenet things that sharing of knowledge is going to create innovation on a level unprecedented, unparalleled. Delivery capacity is expanded past a traditional 8-hour workday. That's the gimme. If you can get that cyclical overlap working schedule for all of your different teams, understand who has the right roles and responsibilities and align them properly, you are potentially going towards a 12 to 24-hour type of operation. A pure 24-hour is probably not always going to be possible. It's like a delivery ops type of thing. We tend to work more on strategic deliveries. But I would say that our optimal ends up being anywhere between 12 to 16 hours worth of total work achieved by the project team per day. Teammates across various organizations grow and learn from the professional and personal experiences of others. It's kind of going back to point 1, but more on the personal level. Again, learning so much from someone who, one of my developers may be partnered with a designer that he or she has never worked with before from another organization to achieve something. And there's going to be so much life and professional experience that those two have that even just a slight bit of then overlap, then, you can share 1% of knowledge with each other or 1/10 of 1% is going to bring these perspectives that outvalue any type of training that we can buy as an organization for our employees and things like that. Getting people with different ideas collaborating towards a common goal requires you to take the blinders off and to, really expand your peripheral vision on how you're going to achieve best of breed, which is to the next point, high quality deliverables are created by best of breed talent across the globe. And it's a self-fulfillment of the best of breed that you're building out by continuing to expand the knowledge of your team and these other teams by working with all of these different folks on these global delivery teams, because you're constantly picking up new ideas and approaches. Because then you get to another thing too, is incorporating ideas from other local markets into global initiatives. And I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the U.S. healthcare system is wildly different than the rest of the world, right? So a lot of what the U.S. does in pharmaceutical marketing isn't applicable to the rest of the world. Like vaccine marketing in the U.S. is a big deal. They make a ton of profit on that. You can read financial reports for any of the major vaccine makers, Pfizer, Sanofi, Merck, GSK. But then you'll notice a funny thing in the rest of the world, they don't make any money from vaccines. So what does that mean to marketing? Well, it means marketing in that product line in the rest of the world doesn't really exist. It's done in a different way. So if it's done about efficacy and immunogenicity, two terms a lot of y'all are probably hearing now as you're hearing about all of these new COVID vaccines. You're hearing a lot about immunogenicity. It's a word I hear every day. If you need a spell check on it, just text me. So what we've learned and what we've been doing in vaccine marketing is to take these conversations around effectiveness and immunogenicity that happen in markets not in the U.S. and how can we actually have that type of conversation in the U.S. Because, I'm using a very specific case here, but it's important this is all specific. It's all nuance driven. It's not high level. It's not a conversation that goes at the C level. It's a conversation that goes at the delivery level. But you need to be able to speak to it to the C level. So bringing in those local market ideas, we're able to start understanding about how healthcare providers in other countries, developed nations, nations with better overall healthcare scoring than the U.S., how are they doing vaccine marketing better? Why is it so different? And we've been able to pull ideas on how the immunogenicity of certain vaccines is discussed via digital platforms, what the digital practice builds in other countries, and then bringing them ideas back into the U.S. So it's not always this price-driven conversation. And that's actually brought us to having a lot of our virtual reality experience engagements that are in the pipeline right now to get out the door into 2021. Is we were seeing other local market ideas where the engagement and the interactions were very different, and how can we create this same type of interaction back in the U.S. So that ultimately is how my team and the digital team and a lot of our clients and partners have worked over the past 7 to 8 years in a global capacity. That's what we've seen as some of the challenges, how we've worked through and what we work through every day, and then the ultimate success and outcomes from such.